Good evening and welcome to the January 20th, 2026 meeting of the Town of Penfield Transportation Committee. I am calling this meeting to order at 5 p.m. If people have had the opportunity to review the minutes, can I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Is there a...
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you. We will move on to committee discussion. The first item is an active transportation presentation by Colliers.
Yeah, so thank you. Tom Robinson's back once again. This will be the third time before this committee, so we had kind of an initial kickoff, did some data gathering. They're back tonight to kind of share some draft thoughts and ideas. I think Tom's looking for some feedback from this group ahead of them moving it forward, and then eventually we'll have some other opportunities for the public input, on the draft concept. I know we're setting up some meetings with the DOTs as well to get them some early input on it, but I know he's got an extensive slides to go through tonight, share some of that information we've seen a little bit before, but then, further than that along. So I think he's looking for some, feedback from us on this initial phase, and then they'll be back before this group, as well as the public in the not too soon future. So with that, I'll throw it over to you, Tom.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, this is our third meeting. Last time was end of October, I think, so we've done quite a bit of work since then. Mark's right, there are quite a few slides in here, so I'm going to roll through them fairly quick, and then we can bounce back, and I'll try to answer anybody's questions, and absolutely interested in any ideas or feedback you have. We'll also make this slide deck available after this meeting so you can go back and take your time and look at things and think about them. So agenda for tonight is a quick update on the project status. I want to share some of the in-field data collection that we have from our trail cameras. We're just getting started with sort of building a toolbox for our recommendations. So nothing is finalized yet, but we're getting some good ideas of improvement strategies based on the public input we had and the data collection and analysis that we've done. And then I'll touch a little bit on what the steps are moving forward. So this is our calendar, which really hasn't shifted too much. We're staying more or less on schedule with this project, so that's a great thing. We're clearly in winter now, as you can feel from outdoors. This is our third meeting with the committee, and we're just starting to get rolling with the draft recommendations. Steps after this are putting together a draft plan, at which point we'll present everything in a public open house. We'll get feedback from the public, which we can integrate into the plan, and then we'll move forward to a town board public hearing. And probably sometime later in the summer, we'll have a final report and active transportation plan. So I think, as you know from the last meeting, we actually set up time-lapse digital cameras at some key intersections and crossing points around the town. We learned quite a bit from that data. What you're seeing, the line, so there's a map for pedestrian movement and there's a map for bicycle movement. And basically, the lines represent where people are moving, and a thicker line is more people, and a thinner line is less people. And this is a summary of a lot of data, but it kind of gives you a sense of how people move across intersections. And in this case, they go right across the diagonal because that's the connecting point between where one sidewalk ends, and then it starts up again on the other side of the road. So it's a very natural movement pattern. But what we want to do is think about ways to make that as safe as possible for folks. Same intersection, bicycle numbers are always less, but their movement patterns can vary a little bit too. So this is active transportation, so we're considering both pedestrians and bicycles equally. And then we have, the cameras give us a million different still photos and video, but we just grabbed some to sort of represent the cross-section of user types that are in these different locations, and it gets very interesting, as you can see. We've got everything from folks in wheelchairs to dog walkers to serious fitness runners to families on bicycles. So this can inform what we come for later when we talk about safety improvements and enhancements. We looked at 2 school zone crossings, not technically intersections, but very important points for us. So this is the one on Scribner Road. And the good news here is you can see from the fat line where the crossing is most people are crossing where they're supposed to. So this is one thing we look for with the cameras is the level of compliance, both from pedestrians and from drivers. And things are pretty good here. What's interesting is the alignment of this moving diagonally across the road and cutting the corner of that parking lot might be something we want to look at, just because that makes it a little harder for drivers and pedestrians to interact safely. But we've got our information on the peds and the bikes, and we've got our photos that we look at. Things are working pretty well here, but we'll look for ways to make it even safer for people. The other school crossing was on 5 Mile Line Road. So this is about probably a third of a mile from where the high school is. So a very, very dense walking population here. You can see the big fat brown lines. That means a lot of people. You can see a thinner line where folks are not crossing where they're supposed to. And then the interesting one, on the image on the left, you'll see that kind of spur going off to the right into the parking lot, which indicates a lot of people are moving that direction. And they don't actually stop there. That's just where our camera view runs out. But this is what the cameras show us, is sometimes some unknown movement patterns or things we haven't really documented. So we're going to take a look at that and figure out what that means and what we want to do with it. And then the corresponding bicycle travel and photos of everybody who knows this road knows how, how it gets. And, we just want to do everything we can to make sure that the travel modes can coexist safely. So this is a quick thought after seeing that spur going off into the parking lots, that we think there's probably an informal cut-through up to the school that kids are using, and that's something we're going to look at a little more closely and see if that wants to be a more formalized trail. If that moves forward, that would be collaboration with a school district, but a lot of times you learn from where people are moving, how they want to go, and this is probably just kind of an alternative perceived shortcut instead of walking up the sidewalks on 5 Mile Line Road. So something for us to explore based on what the cameras were telling us. So as we start to move forward to recommendations, we break things into 3 big buckets to start. And one is on-road improvements, which is kind of the roads and the sidewalks next to them. Everything within the right-of-way, basically. Off-road improvements are primarily shared-use trails, multi-use trails, mobility assets that are not technically part of the roadway. And then the third one, yeah, that's what I thought. The third one is programs and policies, which is a very big bucket, and that includes everything from land use regulations that govern development and kind of enhance connectivity to maintenance programs. So everything that's kind of non-physical, non-infrastructure falls into that bucket. But all of these things work together. We know that infrastructure on its own is not really enough to make a walkable community. There's a lot of things that have to come into play, including education. So we're looking at all of that and kind of starting to sort out our recommendations. So I'm going to run through a few things that we're starting to look at, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. But on-road improvements include the category of traffic calming, which is basically design and management strategies that balance the different modes on the roadways and try to slow things down using physical design solutions. So some of the things that we're familiar with that you've probably seen, roundabouts, raised medians, different types of speed bumps and speed tables. Sometimes changes in materials can actually just calm traffic down. Curb extensions, that's, well, sort of, what you see in that image is a bump out, but, these work in conjunction sometimes with on-street parking, and they shorten up crossing distances, making crossing the road easier for pedestrians. So there's a lot of things in the traffic calming bucket, and we'll see which improvements work in which locations to make things better for us in Penfield. Closing sidewalk gaps is a big one. We've talked about that a lot. The town has a very robust sidewalk program. We've been hearing a lot. We've had a good level of public input with this project. We had an online survey that got a lot of responses. So we're sorting through where people identified sidewalk gaps in their neighborhoods, and we're starting to map out some of those. And then we'll work with the town to sort of sort them and prioritize them. But, we all know sort of how the sidewalks get developed, and a lot of times they're in conjunction with a private development, which means they can stop very suddenly in strange places. So those are the gaps that we're looking to fill in and just, work on the connectivity and continuity of the system. These are just some more examples. You got a couple there on Atlantic where, sidewalks just seem to sort of go into space and stop. If you're in the neighborhood, you get used to them, you know about them, but there are things that we can work on to make the system stronger. Dedicated bicycle facilities, we've heard quite a bit about, and people have talked to us about what roads they would like to feel safer on bicycling. There's a lot of tools in our toolbox here. Sometimes we consider in specific locations widening existing sidewalks just to expand their use into a multi-use path. Pilot projects for edge protection is interesting. One thing we've observed and documented is Penfield has very generous shoulders on a lot of roadways, but because of the traffic volume, because of traffic speeds, people still don't feel that comfortable riding in the shoulders. So there may be opportunity to use the existing shoulder space, but enhance the edge or buffer protection. And we'll show you a few examples of that. And that has been happening different spots around Monroe County and broader view around western New York. So that's something we'll look at. The idea of bike boulevards is just, can we find a parallel route on safer neighborhood streets that keeps people off the busy main roads? City of Rochester has a whole bike boulevard program. Town of Brighton did a good job. They've just got 2 or 3, but they're very functional, and they let you ride through low-volume neighborhood streets instead of being on, Winton Road or Monroe Avenue or someplace crazy like that. So we're looking at those opportunities in Penfield. Lane reductions, AKA road diets, is where you take typically probably a 4-lane road with 2 lanes each direction, and DOT tells you, well, the volumes are low enough that we can think about going to 1 lane each direction with a center turn lane. That frees up space on the edges for bike and pedestrian facilities, typically. So where the conditions allow and where the roadway meets DOT criteria, that's something that we can consider too. So a few photos, the idea of widening existing sidewalks. Things we look for there is a minimum of driveway conflicts. So you don't really want to try this with a sidewalk that's going through, for example, a residential or commercial neighborhood where there's a lot of curb cuts, because every time a sidewalk comes to a driveway, that's a potential conflict spot. But look at the image on the right, and the sidewalk along part of Atlantic Road is really just sort of, and this is very close to Shadow Pines North, where things are happening, and it might make sense to talk about potentially that sidewalk, which is very useful now, could just widen into a multi-use path that could be shared by pedestrians and bicyclists. So we're just looking for specific opportunities and useful locations where that might be applied. Edge protection for existing shoulders and bike lanes is all over the place. But every one of these, except for the upper left image, these are all in our area. So you'll see things like, it's not very visible. The upper center photo is actually of a milled rumble strip. So that's adjacent to the edge stripe. Those are designed to keep motorists from straying off the road, but they also serve to protect bicyclists who are in the shoulder. So we've had fairly productive conversations with DOT in the past about looking for different applications of rumble strips. The upper left photo is actually a mountable curb protecting a bike lane. I have not seen that done in Monroe County. It's an interesting idea, though, because it's mountable. The bicycle lane space is still accessible to motorists if they have an emergency and they need to pull over. But it gives a good level of protection for people riding in that space. And then there's all kinds of things in between. There's wider painted buffers. The city of Rochester has actually placed those flexible delineators, which again, if you need to get into the shoulder with your car, you can do it, but it's just an extra level of protection for people using the shoulder or bike lane. Any vertical object close to the edge is thought to provide some minimal traffic calming, meaning it just makes drivers slow down a little bit because there's something on the edge. So we're going to look at these things. We're going to talk to DOT. We'll talk about specific roadway segments, and we'll see what makes sense. And the bike boulevards, yeah, this is just I kind of explained generally what they are. These are fairly low-hanging fruit. They don't take a lot of physical improvements. It's mostly identifying kind of bike ped-friendly roads we already have and sort of marking them and educating folks about where it's good to ride. Just a diagram of a lane reduction, so before condition and after condition, and you can see it's really a reallocation of the asphalt. So typically these get implemented when a road restoration project is coming up in the queue and DOT is going to do resurfacing. This happened just last year or the year before on Elmwood Avenue in Brighton, which I can tell you was a very bad road to ride on. DOT said okay to a lane reduction, and they now have nice bike lanes out there.
We've seen this from 441 going up Panorama and East Rochester. If you remember that was 2
Yep.
lanes each way, and then they've done this in that road diet, from there going up. So we have a road in town that it's been done on.
Yeah, it's happening all over. Monroe County DOT sort of maintains a list of candidates based on their criteria, and then, they work their way into the queue over time when projects come up.
Would this be an option for like Empire Boulevard?
Unfortunately, no. We've talked to the state about it. I think once you get above like 25,000 cars a day is, I think, their cutoff, and that last was in the 30s. So once it gets that high, basically they say you'd have a solid line of traffic from one end to the other. There would be no gapping. So yes, it'd be nice to kind of, one, it would slow people down, but there would just be no gaps for anybody to get in or out on the sides. That's one we've asked on
Yeah.
Empire to make it safer.
Especially having a turning lane, I think is,
We're working with the state to get a center turn lane all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing they're looking at. The new apartments, the Bayview Landing apartments that are right behind, I don't know, former K2 or whatever
Yeah.
was going with. They've got to add a turn lane before they can open. So that's going to happen in the spring. So they're going to add a center turn lane there. And then the state's looking at the bridge that goes between us and Arundequoit. They would have to replace and widen that bridge, and then there's a culvert, looks like a bridge next to the Bellagio, the new apartments there. Once they replace that, then we can add that center turn lane all the way up. That's kind of in front of the water's edge now. And that could add a little deceleration if you're slowing down to turn in, and then two, kind of an acceleration lane if you pull out. Then you can, merge into the middle and then move over again. So that's something that the state's currently looking at right now.
Are they talking, is the state talking when they're doing Browncroft of doing this bike lanes?
They are not. They are incorporating some features in for bikes.
Okay.
They're adding a widened sidewalk on the south side of Browncroft, west of Blossom. So they're adding a wider 7-foot wide section, because right now you come up, if you're heading eastbound, you're coming up Browncroft, you're riding up the hill, and all of a sudden
It
the
stops.
curb line comes into the edge of the road.
Yeah.
So you kind of lose your bike lane. So we've talked to them, and they're going to extend that out and then add sidewalks, so one for pedestrians, but two, you could have that widened bike path. We talked about
Okay.
that it could get you up to Blossom, and then there's sidewalks, from there, or more of a shoulder. So that one's, more of just a mill and fill project, but we asked them to do some improvements. They're doing some improvements at Old Browncroft. So as you come up the hill, the first White Village neighborhood on the left, a very short area to pull off and decelerate. They're doing improvements to the center turn lane. So we said it'd be a good time if you could lengthen that. So if people come up the hill, they've got a little more of a deceleration lane to get into that. Otherwise, they're in the passing lane. People are going up the hill fast, and they're trying to slow down to go over it. It creates some conflict. So some improvements, not as much of a road diet, but they are incorporating some of these elements into that plan.
Yeah, we are coordinating with both that project and the upcoming study for Empire, which is maybe the most challenging road we've got. So everybody's looking at that. We also pay attention to transit as part of active transportation. Folks who ride the bus are walking both before and after they're on the bus. So making that kind of last link between the bus stop and the building entrance is something that it falls into a couple different areas that we look at, including our land use regulations, because this is private development and how they design for pedestrians. But, we've got good and bad examples of transit stops all over the place. So we're trying to learn from what's been done, and we'll offer up some kind of base guidelines about how to handle transit connectivity, in the context of a pedestrian network. So the intersection enhancements, basically every intersection where we put the cameras up and we've got some data, we'll try to suggest some improvements based on what we're seeing. And we're just at the very start of that and getting some ideas. I kind of love this photo. This condition doesn't exist anymore, but you've got a crosswalk and an ADA ramp, and they don't line up.
I was noticing that too, okay.
So, yeah, it's just, it's funny how things get put in the ground sometimes, but, part of what we do is when we do see stuff like this out in the field, we highlight it and try to get an easy fix. Off-road improvements. So a lot of discussion about developing trails in Penfield. It's a really important part of an active transportation network. You know, trails can be purely recreation, they're fitness, they're for health and wellness, but they can also get you from point A to point B. So we're trying to find, you know, best and highest use and most return on investment for trail projects in Penfield. And there's some very interesting ones. We had some help from the Genesee Transportation Council. They have infrared counters to get trail use counts on trails, and we worked with them. They set up their counters, and we got some data on 5 different trail locations around Penfield. We got one in Sherwood Pines, we got one at Rufus Park, we got one out at Thousand Acres Swamp. So this just helps us sort of build an understanding, and it provides a baseline so that if you do improvements, you can go back again and measure and see if the improvements led to any increase in use, which is what we want to see. We want to get more people on more trails. So one that came up right away was sort of this potential connectivity from Shadow Pines, moving up through the school zone, coming out to the nature preserve. You've got a single crossing that gets you into Rufus Park, which adjoins Thousand Acre Swamp, and basically can get you all the way over to this complex, Town Hall Park, and everything connected with it. Having worked on a lot of trail plans, I can tell you this one is outstanding because it's a very small set of landowners and land managers, and a lot of it's on public or kind of pseudo-public land. Very few road crossings. So as a trail concept, this is very interesting to look at, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think the town, you know, we'll continue to discuss this one. We'll certainly reach out to the Nature Conservancy and the school district, get their thoughts on it. But, you know, the town's coming up on some new trail construction in Shadow Pines, so that'll be just an even more desirable destination than it is now. So this is one that our plan will develop a little bit and see if it can sort of point towards a feasibility study. We had talked about perhaps submitting this for a TAP CMAQ grant, but the timing just wasn't quite right. We're not far enough along and haven't had the discussions we need with the property owners. But this is probably a good contender for that kind of state funding once it gets a little further along in development. Another one that we're looking at is sort of an old idea. So the GTC did a trail study several years ago for a trail along Irondequoit Creek going up by the old quarry. But this would connect to the Irondequoit Creek Spring Lake Trail that's in existence now and get you all the way up into Ellison Park and Monroe County property. So it was very interesting at the time. It never really moved forward. The quarry itself has changed hands a couple of times, but now owned by RIT, who may actually be more open to public access. No? You've already talked to them?
We've had several discussions, and they're not interested in that at all. They've got different things on the property. They're using it. They've got their own setups for water testing and other instrumentation around the pond that they don't want interrupted. So we had thought when they acquired it that that'd be a great, you know, connection, and unfortunately that's gone the other way. They're less interested than kind of tolerated it. As long as people weren't causing issues, they were okay with it. Now that it's privately owned, I mean, always can continue the conversation and see where they're at and if things have changed. So I would, you know, include the recommendation, but I know in recent conversation we've had, they've not been interested in this.
I'll talk to you more about that offline,
Yeah.
because we have some different contacts at RIT. They also have a new president now.
That's what I say.
So
Never say never, and
Yeah.
you know, obviously things can change, and how we deal and how we interact with them is always a possibility. but-
Yeah, yeah. That's on our radar just because of the excellent connectivity between,
Yeah, and it's
from where,
been talked about for years, and
Yeah.
would make a lot of sense connecting other trails that already exist into Ellison Park and beyond. So it's
right, right.
been on our radar for quite a long time.
So we have some very good trail opportunities in Penfield. They have absolutely strong recreation and fitness value, but also connectivity to community destinations. So that's something we're moving along with a plan. Relative to that particular idea, the beautiful new boardwalk that Penfield has, so that's a great accessibility improvement for this particular trail, and something maybe we can build on.
Actually, an APWA award-winning project, so,
Excellent. Congrats.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Kevin and I will be going next week to accept the award for that, so. Yeah, it
Awesome.
was recognized for.
Yeah, it's a great
connectivity and
facility.
Replacement of that.
Yeah, very good. So the programs and policies bucket, coordination with both DOTs, state and county, particularly ongoing projects they've got in the works now or ones that they're planning in Penfield. We have a meeting coming up with them early next month to talk about some of these early ideas for recommendations on their roadways and just, try to really have this be collaborative and get their input and get as much as we can done with the active transportation plan. We're looking at existing town zoning and land use regulations, see where those can be strengthened to go after some of the objectives in the active transportation plan. And a lot of time, this is about the safe connectivity between the public realm and the street right-of-way and getting you to your destination on private property. We have some good examples. We even have some good examples in Penfield, believe it or not, but we have a lot of areas that need work too. But this starts with the zoning and the land use regulations, so we'll give some recommendations sort of on that end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is after things are all built, and how do we take care of them and keep them in a condition that supports pedestrian and bicycle movement. We talk about these in general, and we also talk about individual ideas we have for improvements, what the maintenance capabilities are, and what would be required. And we got to find the common ground there. But obviously, we know it this time of year, if you're trying to walk around on sidewalks, that snow management and maintenance is a big thing. It's always a challenge in our climate. E-bikes have been mentioned to us several times. This is an emerging area. There's not real good, consistent regulation for e-bikes. That's kind of evolving now. So we're tracking who's on top of it, what the best examples are, maybe some peer communities that Penfield can look at. But we'll definitely have thoughts and recommendations for that in the study. I mean, it kind of bridges the gap. Are they active transportation? Sort of. But they share the facilities. They share the same multi-use pathways, and where people are walking and riding their bikes, e-bikes and scooters are too. So we all got to live together and try to find, common ground between the travel modes. And then maybe this is my last slide, but, we always talk about these 3 E's working together. So the engineering, the enforcement end of it, and the education end of it. All got to sort of support each other. They all have a role to play. On the enforcement end of it, we're seeing some interesting things happen in the region. So City of Syracuse now has cameras up and gives citations within their school zones. So you probably remember City of Rochester had red light cameras in certain areas several years ago. Those got pulled for various reasons, but they're sneaking back in to some of our regional communities. And, Syracuse is using it, but specifically in their school zones. So we're kind of tracking how that technology is being used. It's getting improved, it's getting more reliable, and, different municipalities are using it different ways. So just something to track and be aware of and see if there's opportunities. And then the general concept of safe routes to schools, everything that ties into that. These are focus points in Penfield. It's something that's very important to us. It also is something that has its own funding streams attached. So this is another thing we do as we start to recommend improvements. We think about what funding streams and where you could get money to finance projects.
I haven't seen that one in a couple of years. Is that?
It kind of moves around.
Seems to ebb and flow a bit, because I know we'd used it in the past for some sidewalks and crossings near schools, and it seems like the last couple of years that I haven't seen it, but.
Yeah, it's not really its own thing right now. It's embedded in a couple other like CFA-type programs.
Okay.
But it still gets a lot of attention, and it can certainly get you kind of grant-winning points on a project if it's serving a school zone. Well, that was pretty good. I got through that pretty quick. It's like 40 slides. I was like, oh gosh. So yeah, our next steps are we'll be discussing these draft recommendations. We'll be having our meetings with some of the stakeholders and with the DOTs to get their input. Then we'll move things forward to a set of final recommendations that'll go into a draft plan. The draft plan comes back to everybody, including a public meeting. So we have another work session with the public where they can respond, and we still have enough time to integrate new input into a final plan. That's our public open house. There's a town board hearing, and then, yeah, I think it'll probably be later in the summer that we finalize the report and give you some guidance for implementation. So I think that's most of it. That's where we are right now.
The only thing that piqued me in this was your suggestion about using speed humps. We have one street with speed humps in Penfield, and we end up with all these neighbors wanting those. And from a public, yeah, he's shaking his head, from a public works point of view, those are very difficult to plow.
They are.
And if you've ever gone down, I'm having a senior
Huntington
moment.
Meadows.
Huntington Meadows, thank you, having a senior moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. People have
I know
put
that road.
stakes and rocks because people would drive around them onto the lawns where your children are playing to avoid the sidewalk. And there's no sidewalks, yeah. So
Gotcha.
they'll drive wherever to avoid the speed humps, or they'll go flying over them just to see what happens. But that's not something we as a committee have been encouraging in our,
But, I mean, I think could be used in a plaza, could be used in other locations.
Right.
So I think there's application for them. I know if you go to Webster Plaza, they have the raised walkways in there. And so I think there could be and we have policies in place. We've recently adopted our speed hump policy, the RRFB, policy, crosswalk policies. We have some standardization, because as you have said, we've had requested almost every street in Penfield that has
Right,
asked
they
for them
want
at this
speed
point in
bumps,
time.
yeah.
And, either, a crosswalk, flashing beacon, so we've tried to standardize around that, but I think, there's time and place for them.
right.
I think we just need to be, as we've always been, judicious about where and when we use them and how, but I think in plazas and other locations and even private property that, could have some benefit to it.
Yeah, your concerns are definitely valid. And you don't see them a lot on roads around here for good reason.
Snow plowing is
Yeah, exactly.
a major
Exactly.
thing, and I mean, even in I was looking at some of the images, and I'd be interested to get it more into it, is, the dedicated lane for biking. Obviously, looking towards Bob, is we've got to figure out, yes, it's great to separate it, but how do we plow it? How do we maintain it?
Yes.
Some stuff you look in is you've got the little, reflector
Oh, yeah.
sticks down the way. How do you plow and maintain that section in the wintertime if they're not removable or an additional curb? So, a lot of these features look great. We've just got to make sure that, we adapt them for Western New York and snow season, and
Yeah.
how are those incorporated to, get the same effect, but also make sure we can still maintain them with existing equipment and crews that we have.
Yeah, the maintenance required is something we want to look at a very early level for any improvement. So anything that's different than what you're doing now is something we have to talk about, because there's always trade-offs. And, Even something as simple as, well, if you've got space, give me the painted chevron buffer. Paint costs money. Paint has to be redone. There's always a maintenance requirement, and there's always a cost, but, it's balanced against what are the safety improvements, what are people's comfort levels. It's the return on your investment that you really do want to look at.
And I think part of that is, as Tom had shared, we're going to meet with the DOTs to make sure, because this not only covers our roads, it covers county and state roads. We want to make sure anything we're putting out there is not contradictory to what they would approve, not approve. So they've, welcomed a meeting. We're very happy that, we want to meet with them ahead of, pulling out a final recommendation and have something saying, that's great, but we're never going to approve it on our road. And, that's not a good plan to have out there. Now we're contradictory with them from the start. But it's great that, they're willing to meet, want to, have some, feedback and input on this document already. So that was good news.
And we do try to pay attention to what, this whole big bag of possible improvements, what would be in the town's control versus state DOT or county DOT, and, maybe look a little closer at those things and prioritize them a little bit, just because, it's great if there's things we can do on town roads, or certainly, off-road trails.
Yeah, a lot of those connections is.
Yeah, those connections are, within our control a little bit. So.
Or coordination with other agencies, or, they have the Genesee Land Trust, Nature Conservancy, a lot of the groups that we work with already on other projects, see if we can partner with them on some of these off-road connections.
Definitely, yeah. So a lot of exciting stuff. There's some good possibilities, and, we're gung-ho for the next phases.
It's exciting. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else for Tom before he? You're welcome to stay. Obviously, you got places to be. I'm sure you'd like to go home too. So
I'm a little hungry, so
Yeah.
I might
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, moving ahead, the next topic we have is follow-up to a stop sign request in Penfield Gardens at the corner of Brentwood Drive and Willowhurst Drive. Amy?
Yes, let me give you just a little bit of context. So new year, just get back into the swing of things. So we initially started hearing some concerns from this neighborhood back in the fall. And I know that it had come up previously a year, or maybe 2-3 years ago. There were issues with sight distance due to there's a lot of shrubs and trees along this corridor, this street. So we asked DPW to go out and trim back some of the shrubs, and I know that they completed that in the fall. I'm sure Bob could speak more to this, but as I understood it, they trimmed back the shrubs and trees basically as much as they could without really damaging the health of the
we
plant
went as
life,
far
yeah.
as we could to the point where it wouldn't kill the tree
Yeah.
or the brush and that. So, and hopefully what we did do, it will green back up so you won't see quite so bad, but we couldn't go any further than what we did.
right. Yeah.
The only next step would be removal of the shrub.
Yeah. So that was something after you guys had gone out and trimmed. Sarah Waterman, our other engineer, and I went out to investigate. We determined that we would have to do a site distance study to determine, if there were any other changes needed, if the shrubs needed to be removed, that kind of thing. So we did go out in November. There we go, a little bit more recent picture. And complete our site distance measurements, brought them back, and looked at all the data. So for this intersection, really our main concern is just this one corner. All of the other corners of the intersection have very adequate site distances. There's no issues there. So it's really just this one corner. So we looked at the site distance based on NISDOT guidelines. For a speed limit of 25 miles an hour, you would want a site distance of 280 feet. But what we measured was 59 feet in this location.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite a bit of
Big
a
difference.
gap there.
Yeah.
Yes. In looking at what you could do, there's a few options. So the MUTCD first recommends removal of anything that's in the sight distance that would be blocking the sight distance. That would be probably all of this greenery here, and then even back a bit, I think these trees are also blocking the sight distance. And then barring that as a possibility, they recommend an additional stop sign. So if you're stopped at this stop sign and there isn't enough sight distance for you to look to your left and see if anybody's coming, and be able to avoid an accident there, that's when they would recommend an additional stop sign. So that basically would be up to the town board in the end to make that recommendation of shrub removal, stop sign. But the end result of our measurements and study was that the current sight distance is 59 feet with a requirement of 280 feet.
So could you just do the stop sign instead of removing all the vegetation? Because I feel like if you go through and remove the vegetation, you're gonna, impact the character of the neighborhood there. I feel like you're getting a lot of community feedback
That's why this
For
group's
sure.
going to make a recommendation to the town board.
Yes. So that's valuable input, yeah.
So if you go by the manual says if there's an impediment that can be removed, you remove it.
Okay.
Obviously, that's an impact to the neighbor, it's impact to the residents in the area, so I think we'll need to come for the recommendation from this committee that either removal or a stop sign is warranted, if the group concurs with that, and then we'll pass that recommendation on the town board, and the town board will have to take it under consideration and decide what action they'd like to take. I mean, we could look and see if the trees are in the right-of-way. Obviously, we'd contact the neighbor, but we have every right to remove them in the right-of-way if they're outside the right-of-way. You could trim them to the right-of-way line, see if that would make a difference. Obviously, that would impact the life and health of the trees, shrubs. So that's why I say I think
And then we
it'd
have
be a
to go back
recommendation.
and keep trimming them every year, right?
We'd have to look at trimming them, so
Okay.
I
How
would say
many
the-
accidents have been in this intersection?
In the last 10 years, none.
Okay, well, that's good. And this is in a neighborhood, so
Correct.
the
It's in
people
the
that are, for the
middle,
most
so I
part,
think-
other than delivery guys, are your neighbors.
I would say yes.
I think the people that live there have learned that it could be a dangerous situation.
But it's the Amazon driver that's in a hurry, or the UPS or FedEx guys. that-
Visitor, or somebody else that
Visitors,
doesn't
yep.
know the area as well, that it's become more of an issue recently, kids on bikes and people walking and other stuff that, it's come up. We did get a petition, shared that with a group, it's come to the town board as well, that the neighbors would like it. I know it hasn't gone as fast as they may like, but, we're trying to follow our normal process and did our measurements and everything else, so it's kind of back to this group.
I think a stop sign makes perfect sense. So that, I vote to recommend that to the town board.
So I think, are we putting forth either or? Option one, following strict manual, is removal of the shrubs, and we can decide if that's warranted or not, or installation of stop signs, and you wouldn't do one side without the other.
Right.
Right.
So you would
right.
balance it out, it would become a four-way stop intersection, not a three-way, it would be awkward. but-
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I lost track of where the other stop sign was.
Sure, yeah, I'll do it from an aerial view this time, so it's a little bit clearer. So there are currently stop signs on Willowhurst, so in both directions, so coming up to Brentwood, there's one here and one here. The sight distance, the corner that's the issue with the sight distance is this one. So we were looking at if removal of the shrubs or a stop sign would be warranted on Brentwood, so the stop sign would be here. Yeah,
And Mark, you were saying that it would actually be a four-way stop,
You would
though?
add the one on the other side, you wouldn't do a three-way intersection, it would just be awkward.
It would be
So
confusing,
while
yes.
the other side is not warranted by sight distance, just in keeping a balance, you would put one on the other side as well.
Yeah, because if I pulled up and wasn't familiar, I would think, okay, it's a two-way stop unless you say three-way, and then it's like, well, is this the way, or is this the way that
Yeah.
doesn't have a stop sign? So,
become more confusing
Yes.
than the benefit of going, well, this one you have sight distance, you don't need it, and it would create more confusion and probably create accidents than solving an issue.
right. Okay.
So the recommendation would be,
And I think if the group concurs, is it
Stop
warrants
signs.
either removal of
Removal of the
the
shrubs.
sight
or-
distance
right.
shrubbery or the installation of stop signs in this
And
location.
you're going to let the town board decide that?
That's up to
That is up to them.
I mean, if they're
You don't want us to
looking,
just come in and say, stop sign, so you don't look like the bad guys?
I mean, I think we need to follow the manual,
I
and,
know, I
our
get it.
recommendation, and then the town board can come back and say, well, let's do some survey work and see where the shrubs are. Are they in the public right-of-way? We can take them out. If they're on private property, how do we'd have to look at other things, with the town attorney, if it's impacting sight distance of an intersection, what are our rights to go in and
Right.
remove shrubs on private property? I think that takes it out of this committee's role, is now we're, contacting a homeowner, and, or the town
Yeah.
board can say, we're just going to move forward with stop signs, and that's where we're going with it, so.
I don't have a big problem with stop signs, but some areas where we have stop signs, people go right through anyway, so.
But they're only suggestions.
You bring up a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that really the stop sign recommendation, either removing the shrubs or the stop sign recommendation, it's not really to help deal with any speeding down
Right.
Brentwood, right? Because that's not what stop signs are supposed to be for. This is really coming from the sight distance
Okay.
aspect. But, so you bring up a really good point. Yeah, it's not really going to stop people from
Yeah, and stop signs
blowing
are never
through.
meant to be
Yeah.
speed control devices,
Right.
even though we get requests for that all the time, is to
Right.
put a stop sign in every so often, that'll just slow people down. That's not
The other
what they're
thing
there
too
for.
is, if you have to put a stop sign up, and if you trim the vegetation back, put a stop sign up, that vegetation could become overgrown again if you're not out there.
We still need to
Right.
keep that trim back, otherwise you're not going to see the stop sign either. That'll
Yeah.
get eaten by the shrub sooner than later.
Right, but the measurement says on there for it to work, that shrub would have to be removed. It would not be a trim job at that point, it would be a removal.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have that issue at that point.
True.
That's the thing we have to keep in mind. It would not be a trim, it would be removal.
Okay.
so my understanding is this committee doesn't actually vote. They
Well,
I mean, we just say if everybody's in agreement, it's an informal, we don't do a roll call vote, but just as long as everybody's,
Is everyone in agreement to send that recommendation
Yes.
to the
Yes.
town board?
Yes.
So, and before we move on from this topic, I kind of wanted to keep these separated to just make things less confusing, hopefully, but in the same neighborhood, we basically have the same situation at a different intersection. So if you'd like, we can look at that now. It's one that we've seen before. So this is the first one we just looked at, Brentwood and Willowhurst. This other intersection that we've been looking at, Kenmont and Henderson. So we have almost exactly the same issue of the sight distance at this, I guess you could call it like left-hand corner. We basically went out same day, same time, did the same measurements at this intersection as well, and got almost exactly the same measurement. I think at this intersection, we got a measurement of 63 feet was the existing sight distance, and again, the 280 is required. So, very similar item. I imagine your recommendation would be similar, but I will
So
leave
you're
that up to you.
thinking, so there is no stop sign,
Not on Henderson.
not on Henderson?
it's a T intersection.
Correct.
Right, I get that. So
So-
you assume you're going to stop.
Assume you'd stop, but
Right.
people don't.
So you would, what would the from an engineering perspective, would it be a
It'd be
stop sign on both ends of Henderson and then one on?
There will be one at the end of Kenmont.
Kenmont, okay.
So as you're coming to the T, so as we looked at other intersections, if you had sight distance and there was needed clarification, you could put in a yield sign that basically indicates that you need to yield to both sides, but if you don't have sufficient sight distance,
No.
which we don't,
There, you don't.
yeah, as you pull up and you clearly can't see to the west, then, again, the recommendation would be either removal of the vegetation, which would go several yards up Henderson to
Yes.
take that out in order to get the sight distance, or install another stop sign, to make sure people understand they got to stop roll up and then have adequate sight distance either direction.
Right.
Okay.
So I think it would be a similar situation where an additional stop sign, if there was an additional stop sign recommended at this leg of the intersection, we would also have it mirrored on the other side to make sure it's consistent.
It's only two. So the street doing the T, Kenmark,
I believe.
would not have a stop sign, or does it?
Kenmark
I believe
does.
it does.
Or it would
Oh,
have.
ended up a little bit further back than I
Oh,
intended.
you're going the wrong way.
Am I going the wrong way? Well, that would explain it. Oh, no, it doesn't.
No, it does not have a stop sign.
It's just
So
a
it'd be a
two-way
stop at,
intersection.
so it'd just be a stop at the end of Kenmont. Or we'd start with that and then look and see if that doesn't solve the situation, you could go with a three-way stop in the future. I'd say maybe we kind of do incremental, let's start with a stop sign at the end of Kenmont, see if that solves it before, because that would be
Yeah.
a big change. All of a sudden, Henderson, you're on a through street that's always been a through street, and now all of a sudden you've got a mid-block stop.
I feel like if you put a stop sign there, will just roll through it.
So that's,
Yeah.
again, just more signage doesn't always make it a better situation. It may
Right.
create more of a situation. So I think in this one, I think maybe we come back with a recommendation of either remove the vegetation and/or
Yep.
put a stop sign at the end of Kenmont. Let
That makes
that be
sense.
and see how we do for 6 months, and then if it continues to be a situation, then we can go back and reevaluate and see if, additional measures are needed. Similar to what we did, we've kind of escalated, in a couple of different spots we've looked at and added a sign, and then it hasn't worked, and we've done 2 signs, and then, added some additional stuff and kind of taken in a progressive step forward. Again, if the group,
Is there agreement to send that recommendation
Yes.
to the town
Yes.
board?
Yes.
Yep.
okay.
Definitely.
Okay. Was that it for that?
Sure is.
Okay. So next, we have a stop sign request on Liberty Street, and Mark is going to talk about that.
Yep, so this one's a little bit different. So as Amy pulls this up, if everybody's familiar with On Liberty, it's a private drive, so it's
Oh, yeah.
an exit that comes out onto Liberty Street next to Rough
Yeah, the dog salon. Yeah.
Salon or whatever. So it's kind of on the back of, where Canandaigua National Bank is or Mark's Pizza. It comes out of there. So this is kind of an integral connection between where Mark's is. You've got Duncan. It's an exit out of, Woof. Oh, sorry, I said Rough. Woof Grooming. got my dog
We knew
sounds
what you
differently.
Make sure that gets in the meeting minutes.
Please strike that. So this was a concern actually received from the salon next door. So I think whether it was an employee or a user of the salon, as people, I think, again, kind of roll out of that common access drive of Woof Grooming and then, come out onto Liberty Street, same time as people from the salon. It's on private property, so it really doesn't fall under the town's jurisdiction to put a sign there. I know we can talk to the people at Woof Salon. I don't know, ideally, they'd probably want no connection at all, which would kind of get rid of the interconnections which we're looking to have and get people off the main line roads and have interconnections between properties. So
And Mark's is, you can only drive in.
Mark's
It's
is an
not a-
exit only, and I've seen people go out the other way, and we've had
I know, me too.
requests for
Because
people to
we're
put
from
up
New York, we go out
more
in,
signs.
in the
We've
out.
got one-way signs. I think there's 2 or 3 of them posted saying one-way. People still drive the wrong way on that. I know at the end of Liberty, there was a recent sign added, no left turns, I think between 2 and 4. The county added that because a lot of people come to the end of that and have had either some near misses or some accidents. Yeah, you can see the no left turn sign, 2:30 to 4. As people come to the end of that, and as we know, it backs up on 5 Mile, at school times, people getting out, and then you've had, concerns of people making that left and then having courtesy accidents. There's somebody leaves a gap, and then you
Yep.
can't see pulling out. So
Yep.
the county implemented that recently, but this was the intersection here that, as people are pulling out of the salon, some conflict with the people coming out of Woof Grooming.
Don't we have stop signs at, as you're driving into where Walmart is, Baytown Plaza? I know we've got some stop signs there. Is that considered a public road? that-
Those are implemented by Walmart and the plaza owner.
Right, okay.
So that's why I say this is a private property, private.
Okay.
So we can reach out to Wolf and ask them about it. You know,
Would they be
they're,
responsible for paying for it?
yeah.
Okay.
So,
that ain't
I mean,
happening.
their answer may be,
They're a
hey,
small
let's get rid of the
business.
cross connect altogether.
Yeah.
You know, I think, again, more kind of public education and,
Yeah, I guess for me personally, like I never paid attention coming, if I'm going onto a main road, whether there's a stop sign there or not. Like
you
I
come to
stop.
a,
right.
'Cause I
you
look.
just
come to a T
Yeah.
of,
Exactly.
Right.
and you're
so-
supposed to yield right away to whoever's in the road, so.
Right. So for me in that situation, I'm not thinking, oh, there's a stop sign here, I better stop. I'm coming out of a driveway, I'm going to stop naturally and look for traffic both directions.
I mean, that's back to
Common sense.
driver.
It's not that common anymore.
Defensive driving, driver 101 is,
Yeah.
you know, so I'm sure people come out of there and they're not paying, swing out of there, and then somebody's exiting bangs at the same time.
Right.
You know, I'm sure there's been some, you know, close calls or issues there, but I guess there's so much you can,
And most of the
legislate or-
people that are using it aren't the doggy grooming place.
No, it's
I mean,
people
I
coming
come
out of
in and
Dunkin', or
there
you're
to
coming
go
out
to
of
Mark's, to go to
Starbucks
the
or Mark's,
bank,
or, you know.
to go to Starbucks, to go to Dunkin's.
Right.
I'm there way too much.
And then, I don't know, maybe even looking at this sign here, there's some vegetation on the corner at that exit, so maybe just even trimming that tree back or that shrub, you know, would probably a little sight distance. If you're pulling out of bangs, maybe you, harder to see that car that's pulling out at the same time that's next to you, and,
Yeah.
you know, so maybe just a little trimming of that shrub, you know, by them or by the neighbors might help, you know, with the sight distance. back there.
Definitely.
So that's one that came into us, similar to how we share, you know, items of, you know, other jurisdictions or other courtesy, wanted to talk about it, you know, share the concern of.
There's also
of
some
the
signage
community.
there too. There's probably a lot of concerns there if you're pulling out of there in terms of line of sight.
You know, so maybe we can work with them to increase the line of sight in that
Yeah.
area. So I don't think any formal decision by the group on that one. I think it just was
Yeah.
more of a update to the group on concern we heard.
But you will follow up on the site
I'll
distance issues?
Yep, I'll
Okay.
follow up with the property owners.
Okay. All right, moving on. I just wanted to make mention that I recently had meetings with the sheriff and with other representatives from Zone A with the sheriff's office, and got agreement for increased patrols and enforcement in some trouble areas such as Route 441, Empire Boulevard, and the intersection of 250 and 441. So I was very grateful for that, and hopefully we will continue to work together to deal with those issues, because those are probably the biggest traffic concerns that I hear repeatedly. So that was really good news. So just wanted to share that.
Okay.
There's no traffic concerns under other jurisdictions,
Not at this time?
no held items,
Nope.
any new business?
Not for
No?
me.
Awesome.
All right, the next meeting will be February 17th, and I'm calling this meeting adjourned at 6:02 PM.